Okay, what we've been talking about today is volume of rectangular prisms and pyramids. So we're going to start off talking about volume of rectangular prisms. So back in 5th and 6th grade, whenever you learned about volume of a prism, usually the only one you talked about was a rectangular prism. And the formula for that was length times width times height. So you would take the length of the rectangle, the width of the rectangle, and the height of the rectangle, and you would multiply them together. Well, that still works and that's still true. But if we look at our math chart that we get to use that gives us all of our formulas, volume of a prism, it doesn't say length times width times height. Okay, it tells me the prism, and it says that it's this formula right here, which is something you haven't seen before. Okay, now the length times width times height is true, but it only works for a rectangular prism. So if it's a rectangle as the base, then yes, that works. But if it's a triangular prism, then that formula is not going to work. If it's a pentagonal prism, that's not going to work. Any other type of prism besides a rectangular prism, then this formula doesn't work. So on your math chart, instead of them listing all the different formulas for all of the different prisms that there are, what they did is they listed this formula that works for every prism. No matter what kind of prism it is, this formula is going to work. Okay, so this is the one that we're going to have to get used to seeing and that we're going to have to use. Now, the thing about this is on all of these other formulas that we've talked about, notice it's a lowercase b. And that meant the length of the base. Here were your two bases. Those were all just the length of the base. This one is a capital B. Okay, so what that capital B means is area of the base. So it's not just a length, it's the area of the base. Okay, and what we talked about today in class is if you have, let's say you have this Kleenex box. Okay, now if we're wanting to find the volume of that, hold on. Now, if we're wanting to find the volume of that, that means I want to know how many cubes it would take to completely fill up this Kleenex box. Okay, I want to completely fill it up. Now, if you've ever played dominoes, after you play dominoes, if you get finished and you just try and dump all the dominoes into the can or whatever you're using, the tin, they're not going to fit. You have to line them up in order so that there's not any space there. Otherwise, they're not going to fit. Those cubes or those rectangular prisms don't fill up that space unless they're put in a row nice and neat. So when we're talking about volume and we want to know how many cubes it takes to fill this up, what we have to do is we have to start with the bottom layer and we have to completely fill this bottom layer with cubes. And then after we've done that, then we do the next layer and the next layer and the next layer all the way up the height of the prism. So what this means is whenever we're filling up that bottom layer, we are just filling up the base of it. So that is where this part of your formula comes from, the area of the base. So if I know on this Kleenex box that I can fit, if I know that I can fit 5 cubes going this way and I can fit 10 cubes going this way, then 5 times 10 means I can fit 50 cubes on the bottom layer. So that's what my area of the base is. So when I'm trying to find the volume, the first thing I want to do is find how many cubes will fit on the very bottom layer of my prism. So that would be 50. So then I have to figure out how many of those layers I need to go all the way up the prism. So if then I can do 6 layers all the way up, then I would multiply that 50 times the height, which would be the 6. So that is why this is your formula that you're using. So the length times width times height it's still true, it still works. Because if my length was 5 and my width was 10, then the area of the base would be 50. And then I could multiply it by 6, however many layers that I need. So this part right here, this length times width, on a rectangular prism, that is how you would find the area of the base. Okay, but if you have a triangular prism, then the base is not a rectangle. The base is a triangle. So I would have to find 1/2 base times height. That's how I would find the area of the triangle. And then multiply it by however many layers I need, which is my height. So if it's a triangular prism, this would be your formula. So that capital B would be different than the capital B right here. So instead of putting both of these formulas on the math chart, they just put the capital B, and then you have to figure out what shape is the base and how do I find the area of it. Okay, this works for a cylinder also. If you think about a cylinder, it's kind of like a circular prism. Okay, you would still find how many it would take to fill up this bottom layer, which it's a circle. So the area of the circle would be pi r squared. So that would be the bottom layer. And then I need to know how many layers it would take to go all the way up. So when I'm finding the area of the volume of a cylinder, it's going to be the same thing. But the base is a circle, so it would be this formula. So instead of putting all of those, they simplify it and only put this one formula on there. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is know that when we see this capital B, they may not give me the number that I plug in there for capital B, for area of the base. I may have to go off to the side and find the area of the base and then come back and plug it in. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples. So I'm going to just ignore theirs over here. So it says to find the volume of this prism. So my math chart tells me that the volume of a prism is area of the base times height. So I'm going to look at what I know. I do not know the volume. I don't know the area of the base yet, but I do know the height of this prism is 7. Now, one thing that we've got to work really hard not to get confused about is this height is the height of the prism. But whenever we're talking area of the rectangle, it has a height also. But that would be the area of the height of the rectangle, not the height of the prism. Okay. So when I use this as the height of the prism, I'm going to go ahead and mark it off so I don't get it confused. So now I need to find the area of the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the side and find the area of this rectangle. So I know it's a rectangle, so my formula chart tells me that area of a rectangle is base times height, and we could also do length times width if we like that better. So that would be 12 times 15. So 12 times 15 is 180. So that bottom layer, if I'm filling it up, there are 180 cubes that will fit on that bottom layer. And then I can have 7 layers. So I'm going to take the 180 that's on the bottom layer and multiply it by the 7 layers. And that would give me 1,260 cubes that would fit in this whole thing. So that would be 1,260 millimeters cubed, or cubic millimeters. Okay, whenever we did area, we squared it. Our answer was squared. On volume, it's going to be cubed because you have 3 dimensions of it. It's 3D. So it would be 1,260 millimeters cubed. Okay, let's look at another one. So this one would be the same way. It says find the volume of a gift box that is 3.5 inches high, 7 inches long, and 6 inches wide. So the volume is area of the base times height. I don't know the volume. I don't know the area of the base. But I do know that the height is 3.5. So I'm going to plug in 3.5. And I'm done with that, so I'm going to mark it off. Now I shouldn't have put that right there. So I'm going to go off to the side and find the area of the base. It's a rectangle, and notice they tell me it's how long it is and how wide it is. So I'm going to use length and width. So that would be 7 times 6. So the area of the base is 42. So I'm going to come back here and plug in 42 as my area of the base. So now 42 times 3.5. one number to the right of the decimal point, so go right there. So 147 inches cubed. That would be my volume. So all we have to do is, instead of just plugging in our two numbers, we have to find what the area is. So we've got to go off to the side, find the area of the base, and then come back and plug it in. Okay. Now on a pyramid, this all just explains what a pyramid is, which we've talked about in the past couple of days. So we know how to find it, we know what a pyramid is, we know how to recognize that. Now the formula for that is, it looks very similar to the prism, except after you find the volume, you only want a third of that. Okay, this pyramid would be a third of what a prism would look like that had the same measurements. So our volume of a pyramid is 1/3 area of the base times height. Okay, so glass paperweight is in the shape of a rectangular pyramid that has a base that is 4 inches by 3 inches and a height of 5 inches. Find the volume of the paperweight. All right, okay, so my formula would be 1/3 area of the base times height, because it told me it was a pyramid. So I'm going to plug in what I know. I know this is 1/3. We can't forget to write that part down. I do not know the area of the base yet, but I do know the height is 5. So I'm going to plug in a 5 right there. Okay, and I'm going to mark it off because I just used it. Don't scribble it out where you can't read it, but mark it off so you know not to use it again. Okay, so I've got to go off to the side. This said it was a rectangular pyramid. So my formula is going to be for a rectangle, area of a rectangle. It's 4 inches by 3 inches, so that's 12. So I'm going to take this 12 and plug it in right here. Now I have a couple options. I can either take a third of 12 and multiply that answer by 5. I could take a third of 5 and multiply that answer by 12, which I don't know why you would want to do that. But sometimes this number is divisible by 3 and this one is not. But on this problem, I would not want to take a third of 5 because that makes no sense. Or you can go ahead and multiply 12 times 5 and get an answer and then divide that answer by 3. So any of those would work and give you the exact same answer. I'm going to take a third of 12, which means I'm going to divide 12 by 3 and get 4, and then multiply that answer by 5. So 20 inches cubed would be my volume. Okay, then here's just some practice problems. But that's basically what you would do. To find the volume of a prism, you're going to find the area of the base and multiply it by the height. To find the volume of a pyramid, you're going to do the same thing, except you have to take a third of it. So then you're going to divide that by 3. Okay.